You might have noticed I've been in somewhat of an early midlife crisis when it comes to talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And it all started with me analyzing some of my favorite decks. Conceptually, anyway. I don't feel I'd get very passionate if I were to talk about Yu-Bell, but I'm sure there's a GX stan out there who'll do the job for me. As time has gone on, and I've gained more experience with them, I feel it necessary to reevaluate my opinions on those decks and share any updates with new support. Let it be known, I still stand by most of what I've said, although I don't know why I said to run 2 to 3 of each Silent Zero monster. I think I just got lost in the sauce for that one. So while I don't have too much to say, watch me kick myself looking at the length of this vid, I think it's only fair to now give a general reevaluation of it all. I can't promise that I'll be doing this every time new support drops, but for now, here's what I have to say. Probably the quickest section for this video will be about the Earth Machine deck. Barely anything has changed, and Orcus currently has a monopoly on any machine deck worth making at the moment. You know, after Crystron had their fill. They are just refusing to let us be grounded. But there were some new additions since my video on it that I feel is worth addressing. Also, as a general reminder, I'm strictly talking about these decks under the context of Master Duel. So if there's anything in the TCG or OCG that I missed, that's why. No, RB is not worth talking about, and Entercraft, I'm gonna play it safe and say that they're their own thing. Anyway, as mentioned in the original video, Clockwork Knight and Infinitrack have arrived and are very much worth considering for whichever version of the deck you want to run. The latter especially is useful as both an extender and a floodgate. Knight is also a fun floodgate if your opponent is very type dependent, but can also search for literally anything, asterisk, for the cost of a discard as well. So it's still worthwhile in its own right. Personally speaking, I mostly run it for the attack manipulation. Yes, I am that easy to please! It just helps that it's good in other ways, like making Naturia Beast synergistic with the rest of your deck once it's on the board. The only other noteworthy support added was Clockwork Knight. Not Clockwork Knight, Clockwork Knight. See? You can see it in my script. Which is funny because the original video was completely improvised. Don't worry, I learned my lesson. As if having one Link one wasn't enough, now
There's 2 of them!
and this one isn't even archetypal specific, just has to have low attack. On top of that, you can use it to remove a heavy forward in order to search for the continuous spell that actually does something while on the field, giving you even more incentive to run one if you got the other. It can also technically work with the Ancient Gear support as well, so go nuts with that variant if you want. It also tags out a monster on the field with a low attack one in the graveyard, so it also enables your low-level starters to get their effects off if they weren't summoned yet. The primary targets being Harvester, but also Scrap Recycler, who's been seeing a nice surge in usage because of this card. Admittedly, I should have given him an honorable mention in the original video, but he didn't feel like he was able to keep up with the current speed of the game, especially with him saying, when? But thanks to Knight, with a K, he's finally found where he belongs. In the trash, where I can pull him out and use him to dump a Citadel. But yeah, speaking of Knight, he's become an absolute staple, not just in the deck, but any that runs a low attack machine, isn't attribute locked, and wants to make an SP. If the deck had to get only one new card, you could do far worse than this one. The only other card I want to address is Machina Irradiator. It was brought up in the last video where I essentially said it wasn't worth running, but I've seen deck lists afterwards using it and I'm sorry, I just fundamentally disagree with that decision. Its literal only purpose is graveyard setup and field presence. But like I said before, Fortress does the exact same thing, except it's not archetypal locked, and, this is the big one, not once per turn! The other effect doesn't even matter because it's completely irrelevant as the rest of your cards are perfectly capable of facilitating that interaction on their own. You can choose to run bad cards. I can't stop you, but don't be surprised when it inevitably ends up wasting both your time and card advantage. Okay, I lied because there's one more bit of fun tech I want to showcase. You remember Urgent Schedule? Some have been using it turn 2 to summon Magical Hound and Junk Giant. Giant on its own is okay, free special summon from hand sometimes, and makes synchro summoning with it completely unreactable. Well, this level 6 plus the level 1 Hound, who, as a reminder, is a tuner, can make the level 7 Black Rose Dragon to nuke the field completely without your opponent being able to do anything about it! Sure, you need the schedule to not get negated and avoid drawing either monster, but the payoff is so worth it. And yes, the inherited effects of Giant still go through, even though he's negated. I love this stupid fucking game, bro. Okay, that's it for EM now. Promise. Truth be told, while I still love the deck, I haven't played it in a while, especially competitively. The only real fun I've been having with it is taking it into solo where I need to go there for my dailies and use Out-Trigger Extension on a River Stormer to turn him into an Arise Heart with a Road Roller and a Goliath as material. It's surprisingly consistent and very fun, highly recommended if you're bored. Though my time is done with the deck, it was probably the most fun I've had comboing in this game, and I will always be grateful for what it's helped me with. Understanding how to play good. Good in, like, big quotation marks. Alright, next on the list is Shining Sarcophagus. Haven't I talked about it enough? Guess not. I don't want to spend too much time on this, as I already expressed these thoughts many times, but while I still stand by what I said in the original video, except that one part, the issues with the deck have become so apparent that I can no longer ignore them. But first, let's talk about the magician in the room. Dark Magician Girl, the Magician's Apprentice. See? I fucking told you! Stealing the summoning condition from Apprentice Illusion Magician, which is just DMG anyway, getting her on the field is easier said than done, as needing to discard in a deck that doesn't focus on the graveyard at all can feel very anemic. But hey, she now power creeps herself by getting an attack boost from Shining Sarc monsters instead of just DM and Magician of Black Chaos. You just know this deck really needed another beater, especially in the mirror match. For real though, God forbid the boost could include the banishment too, since most of your monsters will want to be there anyway. It's also treated as the OG DMG when on field sometimes, so if you really want some fun tech using Dragon Knight DMG if Dragoon is out of reach, there you go, I guess. With all that complaining aside, on summon, it searches for Shining Sarcophagus, and only Shining Sarcophagus, making it a 3-off staple. As consistent as the deck can be, having access to the box is so crucial that any way to boost said consistency is a godsend. Therein lies the issue with the deck as a whole. While the deck can do things without it, the reliance on the Sarcophagus is so detrimental to its own playstyle that almost nothing can get off the ground without it. It wouldn't be that big of a deal if what you get for that is worth it, but at most, all you end up doing is setting up 3 to 4 very specific negates. It's not terrible, but for how mandatory the box is for the deck, it needs more than just some negates and battle disruption. I made a whole video theory crafting cards that could potentially fix the playstyle of the deck, so check that out if you're curious. But on top of that, the great consistency this deck has might also, ironically, be its greatest weakness. Think about it. Between the Sarc itself, DMG, Gadget Trio, and Future Silence, which can search for either monster to search for the Sarc, that's 4 cards you need to run at 3 copies for maximum consistency. And that's not even including external search or draw engines like Pot of Extravagance or 7th Tachyon. 12 cards minimum. And no way in hell you think you can get away with more than 40 cards in your deck. So that ends up making a quarter of your deck just so you can stick the key into the ignition! There's barely any room for non-engine, especially if you're committed to the playstyle. Despite all this searching, it's unrealistic for you to expect every possible disruption in your toolbox to be active, even with no interruptions from your opponent. It hurts to say, but even Mirror Force ends up acting as a win more card. Look, I still love this deck. Nothing will ever make me hate it, but I do have to take a step back and acknowledge its flaws. That being said, it's still a blast to play, and I enjoy any excuse I can to burst it out. Something I also realized after making the original video, the real reason Summon Skull is in the deck is probably because it was the first monster for the game Takahashi designed. That's one way to make it come full circle, I guess. Maybe the take control of your opponent's monster effect references how Yugi took back control of his grandfather's Blue Eyes White Dragon in his first duel against Kaiba? I think it makes the best sense. I think we were so focused on how the initial wave of cards were centered around the final duel only, that we didn't stop to consider how later support could have been referencing other points in the story. After having now read most of the original manga, I think it's also fair to say that Dark Magic Mirror Force might be a reference to when Yugi, and specifically Yugi, not a Tem, used Mirror Force to defeat Pegasus's Toon monsters. A pivotal moment in that particular duel. It's kind of like how the Millennium cards were originally focused on pre-existing cards with Millennium in their original names, only to then just grab whatever old random normal monster they could find, like they Memento or something. Yes, I know it's also meant to be Grandpa's deck, but that only applies to a few cards. At the very least, this does loosen the restriction on what we can expect from future support if we ever get it. But at this point, I personally doubt it. Unless it's Blockman, baby! While the deck itself isn't in the spot I'd want it to be in, it still has more going on under the hood than I think most of us initially assumed, and will never stop being entertaining because of that. On top of that, the new Dark Magician support has actually made Shining Sarcophagus a really good engine for shitting out a DM onto the field to facilitate some combos. It ends up as more of a Tachyon deck than a Shining Sarcophagus deck, but I can't really complain if it's getting used at all. I did say that it could be good under the right circumstances, so I'm glad that the card at the very least has its chance to make a name for itself. The deck might not be perfect, but when has that stopped pet deckers before? Speaking of pet decks, I think it's time to cover the final series of cards for this video, Metalmorph. Okay, I need a good transition for this. Time to morph into the shit. No, allow me to slip into something more metallic. Actually, no, just start talking. This should be quick, as there's no new cards added yet. There's some cool tech, like linking off Black Metal Dragon to get either Metal Claws or Full Metal. Also want to point out, Metal Claws is the English name, and Metal Claw, without the S, is the Japanese name. It's very specific and annoying, but it threw me off in the original script, which is why you can hear me go back and forth with it sometimes. Apologies for that. You can also run Black Stone if you're from 2008, or Soul if you're from a padded room. There's other funny synergies like Moonfang Dragon and the new Rocket Monster being able to search for Metal Claws, and him along with Zoa being level 7 means they work pretty well with Kashtira, but I'll leave it at that for now. What I really wanted to talk about with these cards was how it's been feeling to play with them. By all accounts, the deck works and is a lot of fun, but something's been bugging me ever since I finally started to use them. They don't do anything! Okay, that's very disingenuous, so let me get more specific. While the deck is perfectly able to get all its ducks in a row to facilitate the combos very easily, when uninterrupted at least, it becomes painfully clear that all the non-machine monsters don't do anything on their own and just exist to help bring out their bosses. Said bosses are good, but it's really hard to get them all on the field. It's literally impossible to get more than 2 in one turn, since Max and Flame Coating are both hard once per turn. For some reason. I kinda get why, but this makes the deck completely incapable of doing the one thing it's supposed to do. Summon as many of the big guys as possible. More often than not, you just end up with full metal and literally nothing else. This is the exact opposite problem with Shining Sarcophagus. Instead of too many specific negates that almost never get the chance to go off in the way you would want, you instead only get one somewhat protected Omni-Negate with nothing to back it up. All this comboing, and all I get is 1 point of interaction and some inconsequential burn if you're lucky, with some target and destruction protection. Speaking of that protection, Max Metalmorph is on Fraud Watch specifically, as it houses the biggest weakness in this deck by far. Needing it in the grave all the time is such a pain, as nothing in the deck actually does anything to dump it early other than Metal Claws. You can choose to keep it in there and search for another copy in the deck, but then it ends up acting as a waste. All that does is give a draw from Illusionist and keep Zoa from giving your opponent any advantage. It would be so much better if, when on the field, it counted even when set. And if it is, just reveal it! Who gives a shit if they know what it is? You're going to activate it in their draw phase anyway, so you can make the most of it! Even when equipped to a boss, while the monster's protected, the trap isn't. I know I said RIP to the MST users in my Shine Sarc vid, but with the new archetype introduced to support it, back row destruction is once again cause for serious concern. Once that's gone, all they need is any other form of removal to deal with your one guy. Sure, that ends up being 3 points of interaction on their part if a monster is involved, unless they hit you with that droplet of the Forbidden One. But so many decks sneeze out different ways to interact with you that only negating one part just to get hit with 2 more activations afterwards is not an unreasonable expectation to assume from this game. And that's if they have to go through the trap first to begin with. You know, because kaijus. And don't even get me started on Flame Coating, because that one-time destruction protection doesn't do shit if both it and the monster it's equipped to pop at the same time. Out of all the decks I've covered so far, this one pisses me off the most, because while Shining Sarcophagus has a proper board it can set up for, as fickle as it may be, Metalmorph can barely set up a board that can be a threat of any kind. And it wouldn't even be that hard to make it work. We already have a max replacement in Flame Coating, just give us more of those! Have them be treated as max in the graveyard, and let us have more ways to activate the traps turn 1! None of the cards are bad, except Zoa, but they need to be able to work in a way that does more than just exist to summon one guy and fuck all else. Okay, Time Engine is also a win more card. You happy? Like I said, the deck functions and is fun to play, but I've never used a deck that does so much for so little payoff. As explained in the original video, while the deck is playable as a pure variant, it definitely works better as an engine more than anything else. Full Metal is still an amazing card, even without being equipped to max, so it's still reasonable to see it as a tech option in decks that use Bestials, for example. We might never see a day where they work as a pure deck in a way that's better than what they can do now, but as is, they made Metal Zoa playable, so I don't really give a shit if they just never support this deck ever again. I got what I wanted. Good night. And that's all I have to say for now. Decks I love, but can't keep up with the rest of the game. If you're curious, here's my current deck list for Earth Machines. If you want to take that deck to its peak competitive limit, play Ancient Gears. It gets the job done. Shining Sarcophagus has a few variants you can run, but in my opinion, and you're not gonna like this, but one of its best variants is Runic. Synergy with quick plays, focus on banishing, recycling resources, and having a non-0% chance of the Grave Revival denial effect from the Sarcophagus to actually show up. It does so much to make up for the deck's weaknesses, so have at it. If you want proven success, then here's a Tachyon build by Cosmico. Had to add the DMGs since this was made before it came out. Also put in Marsh because I can. This shit goes crazy. As I mentioned in the original video, Blue Eyes has some surprising synergy with the Metalmorph cards, so that's something to check out. But if you want to get real crazy, you can pull off the most insane anime deck ever with Shining Sarcophagus Metalmorph! Yes, these decks can work together. When you know it, Shine Sark got a level 8 dragon, a level 6 fiend, and a warrior that can reach level 5 almost immediately. It's great to see my two sons working together. I hope you understand by now that the decks I care about are more so personal to me, rather than holding a perception of being good by the wider player base. Everyone is so focused on meta this, meta that. Well, have you ever met a girl before? I don't intend to come off as pretentious, but if I do, that's a nice plus. Nah, what I really want to get across is that I really care about these decks, regardless of where they stand on the totem pole, so to speak. Earth Machine is objectively the best deck out of the three. I don't think anyone would argue that, no matter how prone to interruption it is. But to me, that deck feels like putting a puzzle together, while the other two hit me in ways that can only exist due to external sources, irrespective of the card game itself. There are other decks I'd want to talk about one day for one reason or another, but it's not always that deep. Really want to talk about the Fabled cards, not because I like the lore, not because I like how they play, but because they have my favorite art in the game. They look so colorful and true, I just want to take a bite out of them. That's why I care about these cards, not because of how good they are, but if the deck is playable enough, then their mere existence makes me happy. Thanks for watching. And no way in hell you think you could get...